I have this luck of always being the last person to do a moderation, and I always stand between you and the drinks. The good thing about today is that they've already started serving drinks, so if anybody wants to go out and grab a beer, please do so. So I'm going to start off by just a quick introduction, not to say who I am and what my title is, but just more like why I may be on this panel. Reason being, it's not like I dislike generative AI. It's just that I'm a fractional leader and I do a couple of things. One of the companies that I work with is called Humanable. And that's because we still believe that human being is able to drive and ride this automation and technology revolution. So we're not going to negate the human yet. Yet we have to acknowledge the fact that generative AI is here to stay, and how do we make the best use of it in the insurance industry. So I'm going to start by asking each of my panel members to give a 20-second pitch about their involvement in Gen AI in the context of their companies.
Right, so for my work, I actually get my hands dirty by building generative AI model to try to understand the experience of the reinsurance portfolios. Yeah, so I'm really passionate about this subject, so I spend a lot of time trying to understand this whole space.
Brilliant. So you are still on the journey and you're excited about this. David?
Yeah, I've been working with artificial intelligence for about a decade and a half. Started with more simplistic rules-based AI. Of course, pretty much everyone in the room these days has had some experience with RPA, but I think recently, post the sort of first versions of the chatbots that have made their way through financial services, I think GenAI has really opened people's eyes to the fact that machines are becoming far more intelligent. The data science team within Bolttech reports into me, so I manage them day to day.
Brilliant. Arvind, welcome back to insurance. So what is your involvement now as part of AWS with generative AI?
Yeah, a few things I'd say. First of all, I do believe this is a massive, so a year and a half ago when this happened, I felt this was the iPhone moment for AI. You know, we've been pushing water up the hill on this forever, and now suddenly the consumerization of it is getting everyone in business to understand the potential of it. So I got very excited. I've done a lot of stuff on it. I run a little LLM in one of my servers at home as a personal project. And then, of course, at work, I talk to a lot of customers who are trying to figure out how to wrap their minds around this and start building the capability. So every day there are conversations on where are we right now, where are the opportunities, and how do we capture those?
Okay, brilliant. So let's start this proper by asking the most fundamental question. So Aloysius, you are an actuary and you have updated yourself by going into data analytics, more predictive modeling rather than just looking at historical data. So let me ask you the academic question, which is, how do you define Gen AI as opposed to AI, machine learning, deep learning? Can you use some real-life insurance examples to maybe illustrate what Gen AI really is in this context?
Right, I think I see AI as like a overarching umbrella term that describes all computer systems that tries to imitate human intelligence. And I think machine learning is sort of like a subset of AI. And I think deep learning is also a subset of machine learning. Then if I were to use an example, I think Apple Siri would be a good example of AI. And Apple Siri uses machine learning to try to predict some of the things that we're asking it to do. Then deep learning basically is sort of a uses some of the neural network techniques to try to predict stuff. Yeah, generative AI sort of sits, I would say, maybe still within the AI space, and there's a huge overlap between generative AI and machine learning and deep learning. But I guess the distinction to me is the generative part of generative AI. So the question to the audience, how is generative AI generative in the first place? Right? So the difference is that generative AI is able to understand the data so well, such that it understands the whole distribution enough to be able to generate. Yeah. So I think that is a key distinction.
So David, do you agree with that? Do you want to add anything to the definition from your perspective as a tech person?
Yeah, I do agree with that. Maybe to lift it up a level, I think with all the different AI terms, even if you go into ChatGPT and say, tell me what are the different streams of artificial intelligence, I think you'll get an answer with about 12 different streams. I think to simplify it a bit for everyone, many years ago I heard Steve Jobs talk about the computer being a bicycle for the mind. So that was really a way of saying the mind can only think certain things and we have certain limitations in our human abilities, and the PC at the time and connected devices certainly gave ourselves the ability to multiply and expand on human intelligence. I think, just like Ivan said, the AI is almost like a rocket ship, and it's taking us into the realms of possibility that most of us never believed were humanly possible. And I think generative AI specifically is starting to close the gap in people's minds that machines will never be able to have human-like qualities. So if you think about speech, smell, touch, the human senses, there's forms of artificial intelligence now, including generative AI, that mimic human thought, human cognition. I think that's really a way of simplifying that down into a way that people can really understand the different streams.
Human condition, and to be able to really feel that something could, in fact, replace humans. Would you agree with that? Would you agree that perhaps Gen AI is the first step towards replacing human beings? The reason why I'm asking is that I was in an earlier session where they talked about generative AI, product people saying that generative AI can help insurance companies close down their entire customer service center. Do you actually see that happening? What is your definition?
So this is not a definition thing, obviously. Your question is more, do I predict that generative AI will get to the point where it will replace a lot of what humans do? It is possible. I'm not sure if that'll happen in the short term, but it is indeed a very important leap for the capability set that is AI. Now, I'm overall an optimist. This raises a lot of difficult questions, and my view on this is that AI in general and a lot of other capabilities are going to raise human productivity in a way that it'll balance out, and while there will be lesser work for people to do overall, there will be enough growth that this drives that we will be okay. There are a lot of negative ways to look at this as well, but I'm pretty optimistic that this will actually drive more growth than it'll drive challenges.
Okay, so you're talking about this potentially being a productivity tool. So that's a nice segue into talking about the use cases. So I'm going to read this out. These are kind of like summaries that I drew upon from the big 5 consulting companies' view on use cases when it comes to AI, machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. So use cases for AI. Number 1, accelerate claims processing. Number 2, claims fraud detection and prevention. 3, customer support for policy pricing and underwriting. 5, prediction of customer churn. These were AI use cases by one of the big consulting companies. Use cases for machine learning. Claims processing, fraud detection, customer service, intelligent underwriting and pricing, data extraction, though it sounds a little bit different, not really, lead management, upsell and cross-sell. Use cases for generative AI, again, claims processing, fraud detection, customer support and engagement, underwriting, quote, policy generation, customer upsell, cross-sell. So while we are talking about newer and newer technologies that are actually coming in, and the way you defined it clearly, there's distinction between machine learning, deep learning, one may be a subset of the other, but the use cases don't seem to have changed that much. It sounds to me like whatever the hammer, the nail is the same. Claims processing, fraud detection, upsell, cross-sell, et cetera, doesn't sound very exciting, does it? What do you think, David? Let me just start with you.
It certainly doesn't. And I think what you're really pointing to is the fact that most of the use cases are being anchored in the current paradigm around how we think about the insurance value chain. So I think at Bolttech, where we've got the same pressures that I think most organizations have got to apply artificial intelligence around those 4 or 5 common domains that you spoke about. That's what we call Horizon 1 thinking in our company. But we're also thinking beyond that. So with the technology we've got at our fingertips today, how do we start to embrace that in more of a Horizon 2 and Horizon 3 basis? So we look at domains like risk prevention, We look at things like embedded intelligence. So a lot of the industry today, you think about the moments of truth in the insurance industry. It's when you sell a policy, it's when you renew a policy, it's when you make a claim. And everything else that happens in the middle, there's almost zero engagement with your insurance company. That's where I think there's a role for AI to play a really critical role also, not just in preventing risk, but engaging the end customer and having them think about protection. Another way of thinking about the capability of this technology, in our everyday lives, we trust doctors with our health, we trust accountants with our money, but who do we trust with our risk? Do we really trust our insurance company? I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that. I think in most cases the answer is probably no.
Is there an insurer on the crowd? Because we don't have a incumbent retail insurance company. Can you answer that question? Do people really trust you when it comes to their risk? Anybody? No insurer in the crowd? Okay, we'll try that question again later, but go on.
Yeah, so, and I think another way to think about or articulate what the future looks like maybe is to talk about a couple of use case examples. So I'll just talk about two. One is one that we've already built. We spun up a insurance company in the state of Florida. We added water leak detection to a homeowner's product. We demonstrated through data and analytics and the response times to a water leak detection alert that we could reduce the incidence of catastrophic loss. Now, customers love that. We prevent adverse events from happening. We can build that into our pricing. That's something we've already brought to market. Just by quick show of hands, has anyone ever ridden in a Waymo? Has anyone been to San Francisco recently and ridden in a fully autonomous vehicle? So I had an amazing experience in San Francisco. I had 3 rides in a Waymo, and it's not a Tesla. This is fully autonomous. Right. So you're trusting your life to a robot. I drove around some of the most complicated streets in the world in the city of San Francisco, and I watched a human honking the horn, 2 robotic robo-taxis blocking a road, expecting that a robot would break the rule and create a safety issue because there was a pedestrian crossing. So that gave me a really good taste of the future, and it actually gets you thinking, how do we create and invent insurance products for a future that is, in some cases, fully autonomous and with all that telematics data that's sitting inside the vehicle? That's the kind of thing that we're looking at heading into the Horizon 2, 3.
Well, I would trust a robot versus certain taxi drivers in Singapore. But Arvind, your point of view.
So for those of you who don't know, Kalai and I were at the same insurer 6 years ago, solving some of these problems. So yes, Kalai, this does sound a little bit like deja vu. But I don't think it's an issue. I love what you said, David, that there is a Horizon 2 and 3 opportunity here. But the reality is that when we were trying to do this, Kalai, what we focused on is if you truly focus on the customer's needs, insurance is not that complicated a business. End of the day, it's the purchase cycle, the claim cycle, services cycle, and what we were sure will create value for us as well as the customers if we can make that more intuitive, more frictionless, create more relevant products and bring them to customers in a more frictionless way. That's the key. And the key sources of frictions are those things that you called out: underwriting, claims, et cetera, et cetera. And we solved some of those problems pretty cool ways 6 years ago. Guess what? There's a whole new way to solve those problems, the same problems today, which takes it even further. So I think it's perfectly fine that we're very customer obsessed. We are constantly looking at the same problems, finding ways to solve that problems better and better and better with the latest available capabilities. I think that's okay. Even in the Horizon 1, there's a lot more to be done with what's coming into that horizon. And then once you start looking at Horizon 2 and 3, there's just incredible potential there.
So yeah, now that you said that, we did work on this like 6 years ago when we were working together. And I still remember when we were using AI to do claims processing, that we needed to develop 20 different templates.
500.
500.
500
different templates across all hospitals before we could actually manage the claim down. So hopefully, with generative AI, that situation has improved.
I had that conversation with another insurer just a few days ago, And it is now possible with GenAI. Earlier, you had to create templates for the reason that you called out, that every template was different, and you had to train the template to extract data from it, template by template. Now you don't need to do that. You load any hospital bill, and GenAI will be able to extract data from that in a way that doesn't matter what the template is and how the template has changed. So it's completely transformed the way document data extraction is possible now.
Yeah, Aloysius, reinsurer. So how does the reinsurer actually look at potential use cases? And with that, let me throw in another question. So advisory is something that everybody talks about. It can become highly controversial because there have been like some fraudulent situations with the deep fakes going out there, pretending to be your insurance advisor and giving you advice. So it has already started happening. The fraudulent cases have already started happening. With that in mind, what do you think should be good and innovative use cases for GenAI without limiting without risking the customer and these deep fakes and fraudulent cases actually coming up? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Right, I guess for reinsurers, we are more at the back end of the whole insurance chain. So the way that I think about it would be, instead of focusing, at least for us, we are still more focused on the core insurance risk. Yeah, so we are less so focused on detecting these deepfakes, but I would say more of a detecting the real fake claims. Yeah, I think that would be more of our focus. And I think for generative AI, we see one of the use case to be in this area. But I think, like you say, we have been solving the same problem using all these techniques. But what is so different about generative AI? Will it solve the problem a bit better? So on my end, I think we have been experimenting with building generative AI model to detect some of these claims anomalies. I think so far the results has been quite positive. Yeah, I think.
So the way I'm hearing this is that the title here says Navigating the Generative AI Revolution. It's sounding more and more that it's more an evolution, where we start with the back end and then we go into the second wave and the third wave, and then you have Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Now, as we evolve through this, the critical question has always been, how ready are organizations to adopt this? Right? There's a lot of excitement, as you talked about, the iPhone effect, because everybody got to access ChatGPT, and with that, because something was so accessible, we are all excited and we understand something a little bit better. But if you were to look at the way things have evolved over the years, whether it was AI or machine learning, there are always people within the organization that are dead set against it. So AI-led underwriting has been around for a long time now, but it is very difficult to have that conversation with an underwriter because she does not want her job to be disintermediated. So if we were to take a step back and ask this question, on whether you think organizations are ready. Let me start with the poster boy startup company here. How ready is the incumbent and how ready are you guys?
Well, I'd like to think across the industry, one of the roles that we play is an enabler. Like, we've never said as Bolttech we're here to disrupt the traditional insurance industry. We're probably more in a position where we want to help bring it into the future. So that means we do work with traditional insurers every day of the week. It's part and parcel of what we do. I think when we talk about readiness, there's a few elements of that. I think there's a lot of work to do on the technology stack itself and in bringing that embedded intelligence into our products. I think, but it all starts with people. And, a big focus for us has been over the last 2 years getting ourselves AI ready as an organization. And being AI ready, we've got the benefits of working with some of the hyperscalers like Amazon, who've got programs of work to really bring organizations forward in terms of that readiness. We're huge believers in getting almost all of our people hands-on using AI and experimenting with AI. But I also think one of the things that I see as a bit of a trend in the industry is we've got a lot of organizations almost stuck in the POC quagmire. How many of these initiatives are really getting out of the POC stage and into real-world production use cases? And I know for myself and my team, that's something we put a lot of pressure on ourselves. We really want to see throughput on the things that we're doing and not just get stuck doing POCs for the next 3 years.
Right. So if I can just ask you to comment on it as well, Arvind, on culturally, because you've been in the insurance industry, you've stepped out, you're stepping back in now. How do you see insurance companies or the entire ecosystem being culturally ready to adopt this?
I would say I have been positively surprised by the amount of POC activity happening. That's good. It has its challenges as well, I agree with David. But the fact that so many people are putting money on testing this out is fabulous, because it does expose the organization and the teams to what's possible. It opens up minds, etc. The challenge has been moving from that POC to production use cases. I completely agree on that with David as well. And the challenge often is that it's easy to can experiment with this as in a consumer domain, but once you start getting into production, you need really solid data foundations, you need the right thinking around security, controls, not letting this thing go off the rails, etc. And that's serious engineering work. Besides being very, very clear on what's the use case that will create business value and drive value for the business as well. So I think I'm encouraged by the amount of experimentation that has happened. That shows that the mindset to try is there. But the drop-off from there to production is very high right now. And as you can imagine, in the role that we play, we are helping organizations on that path. It is going to be a journey.
So I have a theory that, all good ideas go and die at POCs. And POCs are carried out without a clear path to production. This is primarily the problem. And when that path to production isn't in place and you question someone what happened to this project, typically they will blame two parties. One is the regulator, the other is the reinsurer. Would the reinsurer like to comment on this?
Well, I guess it's interesting to hear a point of view, like you were saying that, like POC, people seem to be quite positive about it. I guess coming from a reinsurer where I work with lots of actuaries, underwriters, and sometimes it's hard to explain some of the technical AI details to them. So my experience is whenever I try to bring up some of these newer techniques or newer ways of doing things, I've been met with quite a lot of resistance. So I think I really need to learn from both of you how to convince the stakeholders to sort of invest in some of these solutions.
So because we touched on regulation, and before we get to regulation, I think typically it is the customer that needs to want it before the regulator would even consider putting in place guardrails or even supporting businesses to take this forward. So how much of a trajectory do you think, how much of a runway do you think this solution has or this technology has before customers take it seriously and regulator wants to do something about it? David?
Yeah, firstly, I think the regulators have got a really tough job. We're seeing this trend, and I think it's been here for quite a while, that technology is advancing at a pace that any regulator can keep up with, and that's not unique to our industry. I think then it comes back to the overarching ethics frameworks that we have as an industry to police ourselves on some of those ethical considerations that we've got to think about. But I think one of the most fundamental things that AI and generative AI is going to enable is something we talked about on the panel session yesterday. If this technology is really the thing that unlocks a quantum reduction in losses, that is solving for the most important customer need. We can drive down those loss ratios and adverse events, and fundamentally regulators are there to protect customers. So I get a lot of belief from the fact that this technology is going to be right at the epicenter of enabling that. Regulators are going to be very supportive, so I'm an optimist on that point.
Anything you want to add?
I do agree that I think this is one of those things which is good for the industry, it is good for the customer. So it's one of those things that I don't think it's going to get blocked. There's a lot of guardrails that have been put around this to make sure that it doesn't have unintended consequences, because it can. It's a very powerful technology, which we still have to learn entirely how to channelize it in the most effective way. I think that's where both users, folks like ourselves who create the environment for it, as well as regulators have to work together. I do hope that we don't get into a situation where there's over-regulation before this has any chance of taking shape. And it doesn't look like that's necessarily happening, so that's very, very positive. And some of the early issues are very visible now. So people understand this is not something, and we were talking about this earlier, Kalai, as well. I think it's quite clear that this is not something you go out and immediately put out an external customer-facing solution with immediately. There's a lot more learning and guardrailing that needs to happen before you start doing that. But for internal use cases, I think the potential to make significant impact right now is there, for sure.
Can I quickly add a point?
Yeah, sure.
So yesterday we were at the session, we heard all these regulators speak. So I'm not too sure whether everyone got the same impression as me, but I could sense that they were very friendly. Yeah. And if we look at the regulations, they weren't very prescriptive on exactly what we need to do. So if you were to ask me, I wouldn't say regulators are the sort of the things, the hurdles that we need to cross. I think perhaps internally we need to think about, I think we have heard a lot about this, like over these few days. We need to come up with very good use cases that demonstrate value to the key stakeholders. Yeah, I think those are the hurdles for me.
So I do believe that the regulators typically are there to protect the citizens, and if it is actually going to benefit the citizens, they will put in the guardrails in order to protect the citizens. So there is a question from the floor. It sounds like a bit of an existentialism question. AI reminds me of Atlas on Netflix. I don't watch that much Netflix, but I will just read this out. AI reminds me of Atlas on Netflix. Humanoid robot run by super smart AI went rogue. Do we foresee AI to be this good that we no longer need insurance advisors? Does anybody want to take that question? I think we touched a little bit about, like, what do you think is going to happen? I understand that, for generative AI-led advisory to be effective, you need to have a system-based, trustworthy data and knowledge. Now, is that the path that we are going to go towards? Do you see that happening for advisory to become Gen AI led? What do you think, Aloysius?
I think maybe I can answer this question because I watched Atlas, I think last week. So this show, I think, is Jennifer Lopez, right? If I'm not wrong. Oh. So in the movie, it's like the whole sort of AI taking over the world. I guess when I was watching it, and my experience of technically working with all this AI model, based on the current technology as of now, I don't foresee that AI will replace insurance experts. I guess some of the products that we're selling are quite complicated, right? Yeah. And at the end of the day, I feel like customers, they want that level of human touch. Yeah. So if you ask me now, I don't think, no. But 20 years later, maybe, but I think it takes a lot of development.
But perhaps like what Arvind said, it could be a productivity enhancement tool, but I'm not sure about, like, young people. I have a 26-year-old daughter. She doesn't really like people. She'd rather talk to bots and like engage with things, online rather than, be interacting with real human beings. So these people start buying insurance and she's working, she's going to start buying insurance. I'm not sure whether that amount of human touch is necessary, but I think that comfort is in ensuring that there is a person sitting behind the machine. I think that gives people comfort. And there's another question here. I think very quickly, one of you can answer this question. Are you aware of any insurers that has moved beyond POC, using this for customer-facing applications and moving this into BAU? Does anybody in the audience done this in BAU already? Yes, generative AI in BAU. There you go. So there's already a use case. So non-generative AI is already BAU. Generative AI perhaps could be the next stage. So before we end, I think I'm going to do a little bit of a round robin. This is typical when I do panels, because I think when you ask somebody a quick question and ask for a quick answer, they tend not to be able to answer very quickly. So I'll make it clear. It has to be a one-word answer, yes or no, or it can be a short phrase answer. But it has to be short because we're going to finish in 30 seconds, but we can have a little bit longer. So my first question, generative AI, boom. Is it a bane or a boom? Arvind?
Boon.
David?
Boon.
Aloysius?
I guess I have to bane because
Because you want to
Okay, a bit,
disagree.
yeah.
It's a bane. Okay, so because we have to work a little bit harder. Is it revolutionary or is it going to be evolutionary, Aloysius?
I would say revolutionary. Okay.
Revolutionary.
Revolutionary.
Okay, great. Are you excited about today's use cases? Yes or no?
I think yes, because of the humanizing aspects.
Today, no. Tomorrow, yes.
Arvind?
Making tomorrow happen today, and yes.
Okay. Do you think insurance companies have got the right resources and capability to fully exploit and optimize GenAI? Arvind?
I think eventually, yes. Sorry, this is not a one-word
So the answer is no, right?
Not
Eventually.
immediately.
Right. Not yet. David?
Perfectly said.
Yep.
No.
Don't have it? Okay. Number 4, blockchain fizzled out in financial services. Sorry. If GenAI fizzles out, whose fault will it be? 1, the tech itself. 2, insurance companies because they didn't move fast enough and optimize its capability. 3, the customer because they were too slow with adopting. 4, the regulator. Whose fault would it be if it fizzles out? David?
It'll be the CTO's fault because I get blamed for everything that goes wrong.
Arvind, is it the CTO's fault?
You know, this is the really tough one.
Quick answer.
I don't think it's going to fizzle out.
Hypothetical question. If it fizzles out.
My bet's not going to fizzle out. This is
Right.
not blockchain.
So he took the 5th, like, go on, you.
Insurance companies.
Okay, the last question. Generative AI disruption, if it does disrupt, is that disruption going to happen from within the insurance industry or without? It's going to come from somewhere else. Aloysius?
I think without.
David?
I feel like a bit of both, honestly, sitting on the fence.
There you go. No sitting on the fence this time, Arvind.
Without.
There you go. All right, on that note, thank you very much, everyone. And that, I believe, brings the sessions to a wrap.